Welcome to the Educating Mindfully Learncast, where we support mental health and well-being in education through mindfulness-based learning. Our Learncast is like a podcast, but with connected, reflective learning in our online community, which also has the opportunity for educators to earn professional development hours. This Learncast is a special experience for mindful educators and leaders to personally grow their practices within and beyond education as mindful global citizens. Before we begin, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational intention. Perhaps placing your hands on your heart. And together we will take 4 collective breaths, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. Breathing in first for ourselves, and exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff, and exhale. Then breathing in for our students, and exhale. And breathing in for society as a whole, including families and communities. And exhale. Consider pausing and committing to yourself a collective intention by saying, I am a mindful global citizen. We look forward to learning with you as we continue educating mindfully together. My name is Lindsey Frank, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for being you. Welcome to our very first episode of the Educating Mindfully Learncast. Today's episode is supported by one of our mindful partners, Mind, Body, Align, creators of Labyrinth Adventures, story-based tools for whole child development and confident learners. You can learn more at mindbodyalign.com. For full access to all of our upcoming Learncast episodes, we invite you to become a member at educatingmindfully.org. I am Lindsey Frank, the Educating Mindfully President, Director, and the featured host for today's episode titled Presence and Embodiment, the Root of Mindfulness-Based Learning. Today's episode will be a little different than other episodes as it will just be myself and you, the listener. I will be weaving learning, stories, and reflections together as we grow the roots of embodiment and presence. These core elements guide everything, not only within our mindfulness-based learning approach, but within our lives and beyond education. So I'm going to start us off with a question, and I'm curious. Have you noticed a shift over the years in the behaviors and patterns that you are seeing in your learning community? And when I'm referring to the learning community, I'm referring to the ripples in our framework, our self, staff, students, and society, meaning our families and communities. So take a moment and see and notice if anything else comes up within the patterns and behaviors that you might be noticing over the years. So for me, the word that comes to mind that best describes what I've been noticing is disconnection. And as an educator for over 13 years, working with children from early learning through 8th grade, and I've been in roles such as a special educator and a district-wide climate and social emotional learning coach, I saw firsthand the impact of disconnected teaching, leading, and learning. And what I was noticing is that learning was becoming more passive, attention spans were becoming shorter, behavior was seeming to spiral and escalate quicker. And I also was noticing the different relationships between people, between students, between staff, between families. It just seemed different. And it seems like there's been more divides in communication. There were challenges and gaps in ways to share what we were thinking in a more healthy way. And you could just see, like, when you're walking through the hallways, right? Like, you can see like this glossed over eyes, which then felt like glossed over hearts. So it was more like a facade. People would put on smiles, or if you're lucky, like I also was finding that people were just so in their own space and world of the to-dos and survival that, including students, including staff, right? Like it was as if everybody was just in their own world. And so I just continue to see this disconnection continue to grow, even when we were connecting to more of the social and emotional aspects. But even with that, there was this disconnection with it. And these patterns that I was noticing, it wasn't just one classroom, it wasn't just one age group. These same patterns showed up across every level of learning, even with adults. And so I just continue to stay curious. And, when pulling back the layers during conversations and my coaching conversations with educators and leaders, including conversations through Educating Mindfully and my transformational coaching company, I saw something powerful. And that disconnection, it seemed to be stemming from a lack of presence and of skill embodiment. Presence and embodiment. And so it's not every day yet that we hear the words presence and embodiment in education. So I'm going to define them here together with you so that we are on the same page. And especially when we're sharing these words within the education context. So we're going to start with presence because that's where everything really begins. So, presence is being fully aware and engaged in what is happening right now. So, I invite you to pause with me for just a moment and just notice your own level of presence as you listen to this episode in this moment. And just notice, like, are you fully here? Are you multitasking? What is happening right now in this moment with our shared time? And there's no judgment and there's no right, no wrong. It's just noticing. So although we can even be physically present, our mind and focus could be somewhere else, right? So that is where mindfulness supports and deepens presence. And mindfulness, I'm going to pull mindfulness in here too, because we really can't talk about presence without mindfulness, or the opposite way too. So, mindfulness is the practice of bringing curiosity and openness to our body, breath, emotions, and thoughts, moment by moment. It develops presence so we can increase our intentional awareness throughout our day and our life. And I want to really highlight this, that mindfulness is a practice. That means it's ongoing, it's over time, and it continues to become refined. And that's why in our mindfulness-based learning framework, all four core skill components are growing trees that include the word mindful. Mindful self-connection is one of the trees, mindful self-regulation, mindful decision-making, and mindful social connection. The skills move us from foundational awareness to intentional connection from the inside out. And it becomes proactive instead of a reactive approach. I'm going to mention here that you can learn more and you can see that skill progression on our website at educatingmindfully.org/framework. But all of those things contribute to presence and really that definition of being fully aware of what is happening now, and through mindful presence of the intention and practice to become fully present. So, still staying with presence, and the next question that I have for us is really, how is a lack of presence causing disconnection? So I'm going to share a personal story that I think we all can resonate with, because I know my clients and people who I connect with and educators and leaders, there's always this particular example. So um I remember sitting in a team meeting one afternoon, and I was physically there, right? But my mind was racing through my to-do list, right? My emails that I needed to send, the IEP I needed to write, the lesson I was about to teach with my most challenging group of learners. I was nodding along with the meeting, but realized I wasn't actually listening. Minutes had gone by, and I noticed my name was by an action item that I was not even aware I agreed to because of my lack of presence and unconscious nodding. And so when I caught myself, I paused, I placed my feet onto the floor, right? I took a breath, and I said in my mind, I am focused and present. And then I purposely chose to be in that chair in that moment because I needed to be, right? Things were happening, and things happen so quickly in education. So we have to be in those moments. And so suddenly the words of the person who was speaking had landed differently, right? Because of my presence and being aware of what was going on now, right? Like I noticed their tone, their body language, and the heart behind the message. And so what was amazing is that after my presence shifted, I noticed that the group's presence had shifted too. Like the team was leaning in further, questions became more thoughtful, and we left with understanding and purpose instead of just tasks. And we knew exactly what those tasks were. So it removed the confusion. And a lot of that, I would say most of that, if not all, stems from our presence. We have to be fully connected, right? So the disconnection from a lack of presence impacted my communication, my listening, my actions, and potentially the relationship and trust with my team and other implications. And if I never became present to that conversation, what could have transpired? How many, right? Like, just think about this, right? Like, how many of us and how often are we not present throughout our day? And this is just one small example of the bigger disconnection that's there. And just mentioning here a side note invitational practice, because as this came through the story, right, like we really need to be aware of how we are listening with others, and we need to be aware of our nonverbal communication, especially if you are nodding, because nodding is that signal of agreement, and rather than active listening, which many of us have been taught that active listening is like showing with your body and nodding, and it can, but if it's just unconscious, it's not contributing to the conversation. So just I'd invite you to really be aware of the nonverbal body language that comes through as you are becoming aware of your presence, and see if you can cultivate more stillness and purposeful engagement today as you listen with your team, with your students, even with your family, right? Like really being present. And so, some things that I do, just offering here as the side note, is really just placing your hands on your abdomen, especially if like you're sitting in a meeting, and just bringing your awareness there to that sensation of where your hands are making connection with your body. and maybe pressing your feet into the floor. That is just something that activates different parts of the body to bring presence here. And maybe there's other kinds of anchors for your attention that might be a helpful reminder just to really be aware and present with your communication and just being with people. So, what about embodiment? If we break down the word, M meaning in, body, which is meaning that our physical body, and meant, which is referring to a result of an action, a state of the action. So, really, that is a state of being in the physical body. So, embodiment means that an idea or a quality is becoming lived, it's becoming real. It's something we naturally express through our words, our actions, and the way of being. So, as I shared, it is a state of being in the body. So, take our organization's name as an example, educating mindfully. It's not just what we do, it's who we are. It's how we have become embodied as an organization, educating mindfully. And I like to think of embodiment on a continuum where on one side you have modeling. And we talk a lot about modeling in education, but I'm going to kind of encourage us to shift a little bit deeper from modeling. But on one side, we have modeling on this continuum. And that's where it's almost like a skill is forced, right? It's not always authentic. It's often in an isolated scenario. And normally we're doing it for someone else for someone else to see and understand. So it's like this, it's intentional, but it's not necessarily just like overtly there, but we make it overtly there through modeling. And then on the other side of the continuum is embodying. And that's really when the skill is intentionally and naturally becoming a part of your actions that's supporting yourself and others. And we need to be using that full continuum so that we can shift from modeling into embodiment for ourself, staff, students, and society. But often we just get stuck in the modeling space. So that's where this visual in your mind of this continuum, and I'd even add one more piece on that continuum. If we take one more step past embodiment into calling that being, right? Where the skill transitions into becoming fully authentic as your way of living across settings. And you can see that, as skills progress, but often, it moves from a detached space to that embodied space. So from modeling, embodying to being. Ultimately, embodiment is about showing up fully as our best selves in our teaching, leading, and being. So, I have another side note invitational practice for you. And thinking about the continuum, notice where on that continuum you tend to be the most. And also notice when you can move from modeling into embodying and perhaps even into being, but focused on that embodiment piece because that really is connected to our being. But just notice throughout your day and notice if there's certain times, certain groups, certain content, noticing when you're in the education space, when you're outside of the education space. Are you truly embodying these skills across all settings? And if you notice that you're doing that in a natural space, then truly that is being embodied. And thinking of an example of embodiment that comes to mind is, I'm thinking about our framework and the component of the mindful self-regulation, because that tends to be something where, it's an easy way for us to see how embodiment kind of shows up in education. And the story that comes to mind is, as a climate and SEL coach, I was often in situations with escalated classroom behavior, along with supporting staff emotions when behavior happened, and just in general, a lot of support when the emotions were present. And as I continued to refine my practice as a coach, like how I showed up would influence the entire experience, right? How we all show up influences the entire experience. So each morning, I would do my personal practice. And before I even left my home, and I would set an intention to prepare for the day. And I could feel my nervous system is normally in that state of regulation and resilience. And I want to highlight here, this is not just about self management, right? That's often a very reactive space, which we need as well. This is the approach of how can we create a state of regulation all the time so that when things happen, our waves are not as big. So that's really where that resilience comes into play. So before transitioning into a school, I would pause in my car to intentionally breathe for a full minute. And it didn't even have to be a guided breath, I would just breathe. And as I walked to my partner in class, I would synchronize my breathing with my steps along with a connected affirmation that matched a quality I needed to embody for that particular class or meeting. So, before I even opened the classroom door, I already would have set my nervous system into a state of regulation where the class and partnering teacher felt at ease, or as at ease as we can given certain scenarios within our classrooms, right? In schools. So even in the challenging moments, right, you're fully present and embodying the skills that are needed for this mindful self-regulation. I did not announce my regulation. I did not announce all the different things that I had done prior to create that regulation. It was just my embodiment and being, and those practices were just woven into my day so that it allowed me to cultivate this embodiment in a way that made sense throughout the life of being a teacher, right? Or coach. And you know what happened, right? Like, so the students transitioned with more ease. Their engagement increased. I remember one student even saying that it feels or felt more peaceful in that classroom. And the partnering teacher had commented about how the environment shifted and how I would respond to scenarios with curiosity and compassion that got results compared to other responses in the past that maybe they've seen. It helped them to see another way of, through embodiment, we can support our students, ourself, and our staff all together, right? And even during times when a child attempted to destroy furniture or rip the cabinet off the wall, still being able to stay in a space of regulation, but with the follow through of responding to those situations. And so when the teacher and I began integrating mindfulness-based learning practices during our collaboration time and then embedded them into teaching with students, the behaviors reduced and their connection grew. The results came through the embodiment of mindful self-regulation, and the skills are now a part of that teacher's and every student that that teacher has over the years, it's now in their own lives because of the embodiment piece. And so this is true when we embody any skill. When our thoughts, words, and actions align, that is reflected in our environment. When we created the mindfulness-based learning framework and the supporting resources, together with my colleagues Carrie Rohrbach, Dr. Kaylin Fullerton, and the feedback from the 2024-2025 Educating Mindfully Board of Directors, we chose the word embodied intentionally because embodied and embodiment advocates that adults need to learn and integrate mindfulness-based learning before or alongside their students. Educators themselves become the qualities of a healthy educational ecosystem. And this is not one more thing to teach and share with students. It influences the well-being of the entire learning community, and it is not doing, it is being. And I want to mention here as well that so often educators are given things to do or to teach, and there's that disconnection with that. So through our being and developing the embodiment, it just becomes who you are. This shift also gives educators and leaders permission, which is really, I want to call it an invitation to nurture their own well-being as a vital and integral part of the educational experience. Because again, in education, it's normally put off to the side, or it's something different, or it's isolated, or it's one day, or it's not intentionally integrated. But through embodiment, we have the potential to impact the actual mental health and well-being of the entire learning community. And with the growing need to support mental health in schools, this is essential and starts with the adults. And in our framework, embodiment is symbolized as the sun, which naturally cultivates the ecosystem. And presence is symbolized by the mountain, which is ever grounded. It's offering perspective and stability. And sharing again that you can take a look at that framework so you have an idea of what I'm sharing. You can find out more at educatingmindfully.org/framework. And there's a visual of that there. So let's shift to your experience with the next example. And I invite you to pause for a moment and think of a time when you were asked to teach or lead something you felt no connection to. And perhaps that content was not an area of passion, or you were given a concept that needed to be covered quickly in a staff meeting, or any other example that comes to mind. So just see what comes up. Now, with that in mind, did the content or concept of that experience become deep learning or just words on a page or slide? Did the time fly with curiosity and inquiry, or was it a checkbox for completion or a pacing task? And was the learning goal felt in the heart, or was it stale that left you wondering why the learning didn't quote unquote stick with your students, staff, or families? Perhaps noticing the blank stares, behavior, or distracted attention in front of you. So just notice. And interestingly, the stares, the behavior, and distractions are actually supportive clues for us. And here's the powerful truth. It might be hard truth, but it is a powerful truth. The reactions of those in front of us are often a reflection of our own nervous system's level of presence and embodiment. I'm going to repeat that because it's important, and just let it land. The reactions of those in front of us are often a reflection of our own nervous system's level of presence and embodiment. So pause and let that sink in for just a moment. So those around us feel it. They feel the disconnection when we're not connected to something we are teaching or leading. And it is naturally reflected back to us. And that is a signal for us to feel it too. So giving gratitude for the blank stares and the behavior. But when we are disconnected from our teaching and leading, we are disconnected from ourselves. Essentially, what's happening is we are dissociating or numbing from the experience to avoid this feeling of discomfort of a non-preferred experience of teaching or leading. And it's especially when we don't want to do it, right? And if you think about it, you are technically being forced to do something you do not want to do, and often with short notice, limited training, or unnurtured skill development. It is no wonder, right? Like why the body responds with a dysregulated nervous system stress response, right? The fight, flight, freeze, fold, all of those. The body is naturally responding to that. And it happens all the time in education, and not just education, but that's where our focus is. And so I want you to think back to that moment that you were thinking about when you had no connection to either that content or concept. Were you present at that time of teaching or leading? And I mean fully present with your body, breath, emotions, and thoughts. And was the content shared through embodiment and a way of not just modeling, but of being, and of aligned thoughts, words, and actions through your guidance? And if you're answering no to these questions, right, and noticing the pattern of disconnected learning, you are not alone. We have all been there. And the same goes for supporting behaviors, perhaps connecting with families, right, et cetera. The impact starts with presence and embodiment. However, the great news is that once we can see a pattern, we can shift a pattern. I share often with my coaching partnerships the strategy of catch it, check it, change it. This is also a wonderful strategy and verbal cue to share with students and staff. So how this looks is we basically catch a thought or a pattern. We check it if it is helpful and supportive, and we change it if necessary. Catch it, check it, change it. So now picture a time when you felt so connected to your teaching and leading, like a time when the lesson landed on the hearts of students, or the staff meeting where everyone was engaged and seeking more. What was different? Right? Were you present? Did the people that you were with, did they feel seen, heard, and valued through your presence? Were you embodying the concepts through your thoughts, words, and actions? I would almost guarantee that you were embodying the skills and you were fully present. And this applies to experiences outside of the classroom too. The only time when action can take place is in the present. Action is not in the past or future. It is here and now in the present. What I would also like to call forward, given this particular example or examples that you have, right? And it happens often, right? When we are asked to do and teach things that we may not fully agree with, right? So, like, these examples sometimes happen, and we're asked to teach or lead these concepts, and they feel misaligned. So, my question is it still possible to remain present when this happens? Presence isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about allowing ourselves to fully experience the moment through our body, breath, emotions, and thoughts with curiosity and openness. So, what if through your presence, it allows others to feel the possible misalignment that could cause a positive shift in a different direction? As a special educator, we were often provided with direct instruction scripted lessons that are expected to be taught word for word. Right? Here's my example. And honestly, and this may make some people upset, but honestly, it didn't align with my teaching style or even my beliefs about how children learn. How can children who have individualized plans learn in the same word for word experience? And I understood that there is research to support that approach and for particular learning styles, but there were always missing bridges to learning with that approach when I would teach with my students. And part of me just wanted to get through it. But I realized when I chose to stay present with my discomfort, my view, all of like how that felt in my own body, and staying present with the students' reactions, I would stay curious. I would ask more questions. I would listen closely. And as my students and I learned together, we adapted to meet their needs, even within the boundaries of the programs. Presence opened a door for meaningful conversations, not just about the content, but about how we learn best. And even that turned into a self advocacy lesson. Presence gave me integrity, even in misalignment, and opened the door to other possibilities to become more aligned with my teaching values. Presence and embodiment are actually courageous actions, especially in education, to help others, including decision makers, to see that there can be another way, to be truly educating mindfully in our learning communities. Our transformation begins with each of us stepping fully into our embodied, present self as educators and leaders. So that was my example. And, just thinking about your own example and the invitation here is just noticing how you can consider becoming more present to the experience, no matter what that experience may be, and how that might shift things over time. And as we begin to come to a close, I want to offer you a few additional invitational practices as next steps as you grow your presence and embodiment through mindfulness-based learning. This episode can really be a whole learn cast in itself, but these are just the seeds to get planted. And so these next few practices can help cultivate presence and embodiment. So the first invitation is continue to notice your presence. Pause during your day and ask, am I present right now? Am I embodying these skills that I need to guide with my students and with others? And just notice how your experience shifts through presence and embodiment. The second is observing your hands. A powerful practice that I enjoy that helps to bring the mind present is observing our hands. It is very simple yet challenging, as our hands do so much automatically without intention. So instead of, instead, like even just for a part of your day, watch your hands and stay present with them. When you grab your water, when you grab your pen, typing an email, waving to families, everything, watch your hands with intention and just see how that pulls your presence present. And an extension to observing your hands is this next invitation, especially if you find that you are not fully present with the moment, or if you're noticing that you're having more of like forgetfulness or that foggy mind. Might sound interesting, but it's very powerful, where you narrate what you're doing, even as a whisper, like what you're doing even with your hands. So can you stay present with every action? By narrating what your hands are doing, your mind has no choice but to stay present and aware. And this also can become almost like a think aloud if you're doing this around students and embedding it during your day. And it can even become informally a language model with your students. And you might just do that during the transitions or the downtime, but it just helps to cultivate presence in those moments so that when you are needing to embed and integrate presence, it naturally can start to develop a little bit deeper. Setting an intention, I mentioned this earlier during our time together, but this is really powerful because it helps you to stay focused on a particular uh, quality during your day. So consider pausing for a few moments prior to teaching or leading a concept and become present to the moment. Set an intention prior to teaching or leading, and tune into the qualities or skills that you need to embody. And what if also, to embed this, you invited your students and or staff to pause with you as an invitational practice prior to jumping into that content or concept? And what if this was the moment that shifted from passive learning into passion? And the last invitation that maybe can be supportive is using your senses. These are very simple. You've probably heard each one of these before, but they're so powerful. And through our senses, they are only in the present moment. You cannot smell something in the future. You cannot taste something in the past, right? Like it only occurs in the present, which is why it's such a powerful practice, especially when we notice the mind is distracted. This is also, different activities. I'll just do a side note here, right? Like in one of my children's books, Big Change, Better You, Beautiful World, when I integrate a practice into there, it was called Tingly 20. And so it's helping children to just feel in the moment. So, if that's a book or the practice that you'd like to explore. And the other option was Notice 5, I believe, which was about the different colors. So a different sense. So, you may want to try connecting to all of your senses. And the senses are a pathway to the present moment. We'll also mention in our Educating Mindfully book, chapter 21 by Renee Meti, she shares the Noticing 5 Things strategy. And you can gain access to that strategy and other practices when you subscribe for a free download of our mindfulness toolbox. Or if you are wanting to dive even deeper, you can purchase our book and you can learn more about any of those resources through our organization at educatingmindfully.org/book. And there is where you can find the where you could purchase the book, the digital book, and also there'll be an area there that you can see on how you can subscribe for that free toolbox. So next steps, especially for our members who are listening today, for our members, we're going to continue this conversation in our member online community. And each week this month, we'll post a reflection question. And by sharing your own insights and responding to a peer's reflection, you can earn professional development hours. So you can learn more at how all of that works and how you can make sure that you can track your hours and participation in these learncasts at educatingmindfully.org/learncast. What we will also be doing is we will be releasing a companion voices blog that is accessible to all, and the mindfulness-based learning lesson inspiration, and that is accessible for our members in our online community. And both of those resources are to support you as you integrate presence and embodiment into your life and classroom. So I invite you to pause for a moment and commit to one action you can take to extend this experience into your life and classroom. It has been a gift to spend this time with you, especially for our very first Learncast episode. Thank you for being you and for all that you do to support the mental health and well-being through mindful education. Together, we are cultivating presence and embodiment, and that's shaping not just classrooms, but communities. And together, we are becoming mindful global citizens. Thank you again, and we will connect soon.
We hope this episode inspires you to take action as a mindful leader and educator. As we close, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational breathing practice. Maybe placing one hand at your heart and/or one hand on your stomach, and together we will take 4 collective breaths, integrating our learning, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. First and foremost, breathing for ourselves. Inhale. Exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff. Inhale. Exhale. Third, breathing in for our students. Inhale. Sipping a little bit more air for our students. Exhale. And finally, breathing in for our worldwide community. Take the biggest inhale yet. Exhale. Consider pausing and committing a collective intention together by saying, we are mindful global citizens. We invite you to continue this conversation with us and our member online community. Learn more about our nonprofit's LearnCast membership and our mindfulness-based learning micro-credential program at www.educatingmindfully.org. My name is Dee DuBose, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for learning with us as we collectively do our parts to make schools and Mother Earth better than we found it. Have a great day on purpose. Peace.